Hey everyone, welcome back to the EAS industry's favorite podcast. This is Not Just a Pony Ride, and I am Katie Ott, occupational therapist at HETRA, and I have Shelby Schultz with me. Shelby, welcome.
Thanks, Katie. Thanks for having me.
So we had the pleasure of going to PATH International Region 8 Conference in Dallas, Texas. We went this last weekend. And we drove all the way down there from Nebraska, which was super fun, about 10 hours. So it wasn't terrible. And Equest hosted. So if you're not familiar with Equest, I'll link them in the show notes, but they are a center that's been around a while, kind of like us, and they're on the bigger side, right?
Yeah.
The same size as us. So we got to see their facility and enjoy the conference that they put together and hosted for us. So if you remember, we did go to Region 8 last year. It was in Stillwater?
Yep.
Oklahoma.
Yep.
And that was good too. And we wanted to get down to Texas to not only present again and see all of our friends in Region 8, but also get to see other centers in different parts of the world. That's what, not world, we haven't had a chance to go outside the United States yet, but the country for sure, right? So, Shelby, you would talk a little bit about like what that was like for you, seeing a center that's similar in size to us, but obviously in a different part of the country.
Yeah, it was really cool. So obviously here in Nebraska, we have pretty brutal winters. So we have to have the opportunity for an indoor arena that has heating and everything in order to run programming year round. But it was pretty cool to see their setup. They had two covered arenas that were in two separate spaces and then had two barns that their horses were housed in. The barns are kind of in the middle so that their horses are able to go out either side to either arena, which made it really accessible. Overall, it was really good. They had a really nice kind of office area with a commons and a classroom. And
that was my favorite part.
Yeah.
I liked the main office area seemed sort of like a reception area kind of for their families. And it's obviously air conditioned and everything. And they have a nice little coffee bar and, just a place to kind of sit, and obviously windows all, on the one side so you could see the one arena from there to, see your participants if you were a family or something. But I really liked that little office they had. We aren't fortunate to have that sort of a setup here where we have sort of a like reception area where everybody can meet or gather or, that type of a thing, because the way our campus is set up is a little different. So I did like that part a lot.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about some of the sessions we saw or what we thought the overall theme was. Because I feel like every time we go to a conference, a region conference specifically, there seems to be a theme in what's trending for education for our industry. And I think there were definitely a couple at this one.
I do too. I think EAL was a huge one. There were also several presentations on like neurodivergence. So different things on ADHD, or one was neurodivergence in general, I think. I thought that was kind of an interesting trend. And then equine burnout was another big one.
Yeah, which coincidentally, Shelby spoke on equine burnout, and I did some disability education, but one of my presentations was ADHD. We'll get to that later. But yes, I thought that those disability educations and equine welfare is always a good topic, but was definitely more heavy this year. There was some like stuff on body work and some other things like that. So that's always good to see. The other thing I thought was another theme, which isn't something that has changed from the last couple years we have gone to conferences, is EAL.
Yeah, that's just a huge hot topic right now in the industry. I think people are really trying to figure out what is it? How do we navigate it? Can we do it at our centers? One of the presentations this weekend was EAL, Are You Ready? And it talked a lot about where's your center going? Does it make sense for your mission? Do you have the resources available? Where do you start? Who do you start programming with?
And I don't think people think too much about that. Like EAL is sort of I don't want to say a beast for itself, but it requires different horses, different staff, and different, the volunteers to run it, right?
Yeah.
So thinking about like, is just because EAL is a super hot thing that a lot of people are doing right now, doesn't mean you have to offer it. So figuring out if that works for your mission and your resources that you have in your current program.
And I think a lot of programs are trending towards EAL because it seems to be less horse and volunteer intensive, which are obviously two very limiting factors in our industry. But I think it really depends on how you do it. And there's two different tracks you can go. There's ways it can be less intensive, but there's other ways. We attended a session on Equest's equine literacy program, which was
Mm,
super cool.
super good.
But it is volunteer intensive. So the way they run it, it requires anywhere between 15 to 21 volunteers in order to run that program for that school, whatever. And I don't know. I guess I didn't ask how frequently they run that.
Yeah, I didn't
And do
either.
they do like one
Twice a
school
year.
year or five, but that is pretty volunteer intensive and it's a really cool program. But
Mhm.
I think if you're going to kind of expand into EAL, those are things you have to think about is what type of EAL do you want to offer and does it make
Mhm.
sense for your program?
Right. So if you think about a program like this literacy program, which we got to participate in all the little
Yeah.
groups, and it was really, really fun. That is pretty significant. I mean, we're talking 30 to 40 students, first grade students in your barn, learning, kind of doing their field trip, right? So learning about the horses, doing some literacy and reading and, academic type tasks, but through the lens of equine assisted learning, which I think is absolutely incredible. But you're right, was more volunteer intensive, and pretty staff intensive
Yeah.
too, right?
Yeah.
Where if you compare it to something like Stable Moments, they do an EAL program where they center their program around children who experience trauma in the foster care system. And that program is set to be more hands off, where it's less volunteer
Right.
intensive and they have kind of one mentor. And that's kind of how they run things, and not as staff intensive once you get the program going, right? So EAL is just such a,
It's so multifaceted.
it is,
There's so much,
it's a spectrum.
there's so much more. Yeah. It's definitely a spectrum. There's so much more to it for sure.
Yeah. So that was really interesting. We got to kind of see some different perspectives on EAL things. The other one I really, really enjoyed was adaptive carriage driving. It was sort of a
Yeah.
two-part session on kind of what it is and how it works and what makes it different and what makes it such a good option for programming for our participants. And not every center is fortunate enough to have a carriage driving program because it does require a specific set of resources.
Yeah, absolutely. And there is a lot of opportunity for things to go south
Hmm.
when the carriage driving program. Not that there isn't in everything we do,
Right.
but it is just its own kind of beast. And you do have to ensure that the people are very educated and very able to run a program like that and that your horses are very, very able.
Right. With shout out to Amy Causey because she did a
Yes.
fantastic job and no doubt in my mind runs a very well organized and safe program just based on the presentations we
Yeah.
saw.
It was impressive to see. They have a handful of really talented driving horses
Mhm.
and driving instructors, able-bodied whips, um, different carriage setups, different
Yeah.
harness setups. It was a very thorough for an intro to carriage driving is a
Yeah.
very thorough base of here's what it is, here's what it can be, here's what it shouldn't be.
As a therapist, I have been a part of our adaptive carriage driving program just to kind of assist with participants and give some feedback and consult on things, but I've never actually driven a carriage or gotten to really learn like what all the tack and all of the equipment that they wear and they use. And what I thought was really interesting was the adaptive equipment that they use for teaching. So not only are you driving your carriage and you have all the equipment that goes with that, but you're also teaching someone to drive your
Yeah.
carriage. So there was additional pieces of tack and things that I didn't even really think about to help aid in that teaching process.
Yeah. Yeah. So we drive with a second set of reins.
Hmm.
So making sure that not only can you know how to drive, that do you know how to drive, but that you can do so safely with extra reins and
Right.
regain control if you were to need to. And there's definitely a lot that goes into it.
Yeah, that was super interesting. Something I haven't seen done at a region conference that in depth, where we
Yes.
got to like actually watch the horses be tacked up and all of that it was really, really
Yeah.
unique and interesting. So that was a cool thing.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about what we presented on. So we traveled to Region 8 to obviously network and get to know everybody, but also present our own topics. So I did understanding seizures and understanding ADHD. I'm a big disability education gal. I think it's really important for our instructors to get easy to understand information about diagnoses so that we can make decisions for our participants' safety and their success.
Yeah.
That is something that we could always use more of, because not only are our instructors teaching just lessons, riding lessons, horsemanship, they're teaching therapeutic or adaptive lessons where these participants have diagnoses that they need to be able to really understand and get their minds around while staying within their scope and not getting too in the weeds.
Yeah, and Katie, you always do a really nice job when you present of tying it back to why does this matter for me in EAS?
Mm.
So I'm not a therapist, I'm an instructor, but I can go and get seizure disability education from a lot of places. But are they going to tell me what are the implications if I have a participant on a 16-hand horse that starts to have a seizure?
Mm.
No.
Right.
But you do a really nice job of always tying that back to why does this matter to me? Specifically in EAS, which is,
Thank you.
I think, very helpful for people to get.
Yeah. And that's always my goal. I'm like, listen, we can get all kinds of education from neurologists or
Right.
physicians or, other people, but you're right. That kind of piece that brings it back to the arena, like im- what are the implications, I guess,
Yeah.
for me? So anyway, I did that. And as a side note, the ADHD webinar is going to go live this week. So I'm really excited to share it with you guys. If you didn't get to see it at Region 8, I did it at Region 7.
Region 7,
Yeah.
Region 6, and now Region 8.
And now Region 8.
Yeah.
So it's time to release it to the world. And so if you haven't been to any of those conferences, I am happy to let you know you can watch it from the comfort of your own home.
Perfect.
So I'm going to link that in the show notes below if you want more information on ADHD, ADD, kind of the differences, what does it all mean, and definitely lots of learning strategies, teaching styles, things that are really going to help our participants who have ADHD be more successful. So I'll link that in the show notes. But let's talk about what you presented on, Shelby. You did a two-parter.
I did a two-parter.
It was a big one.
It was a bear. It was a great presentation. I presented on happy, healthy, sane, and sound, preventing equine burnout. I think this is preventing burnout is always a hot topic in our industry.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I really kind of tried to drive home with this presentation this time around was the key is to prevent burnout. If we get to the point where our horses are already burned out, we're not in a good position. So, how do we prevent burnout? We talked a lot on selecting the right kinds of equines. We didn't touch too much on integrating equines because we just released a webinar on called Seamless Transitions on integrating horses into programming successfully. So
I'll link that in the show notes too for everybody. That was super interesting. And it's a little bit of a complicated topic, but Shelby makes it really digestible. So it was good.
Thanks. Yeah, so we didn't touch too much on that just because I had just done that, but we talked a little bit on integrating horses. Then we talked a lot on maintaining our horses. It's as a program, in order to be sustainable, it's significantly cheaper for us to maintain the current successful horses in our herd than it is to bring new horses in. In addition to the financial implications of bringing new horses in, you have other organizational challenges, staff time, trying to get that horse settled. Is that horse really going to work for you? All of those different things. So we talked a lot on maintaining our current horses. Then we touched a little bit at the end on succession planning and strategic planning. Again, I didn't do too much on that. I did succession and strategic planning for the equine herd at Region 8 last year, which is also out on the webinars. Yeah. So we didn't do a ton of information on that, but we touched a little bit on that. And then the cycle continues with we retire Steady Eddie and now we have to bring in somebody new. So we talked a lot about how that cycle is and how do we have horses in our herd that are going to be successful in that cycle. We talked a lot about the 5 stages of burnout and starting to identify when the onset of stress happens rather than when we're already in chronic stress or burnout, or hopefully we never get to habitual burnout because that's when we start to see big reactions from our horses, rearing, kicking, biting, bucking, those kinds of things. So talked a lot on that. I think it went really well.
I think the biggest thing that I took away from your presentation, and that I think a lot of people had some questions about. I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about like common questions or like big feelings you got during your presentation.
Yes.
But one thing that I took away was definitely more of I could see people coming to this presentation and being like, okay, I'm going to learn how to,
fix my horse that's burned out.
Fix my horse that's burned out. And it's like, oh, no. Let's take a step back. Let's put on the brakes. Let's think about like the biggest part is going to be preventing that burnout, not fixing it once it's already happened.
Yeah. Once we have a horse that is already burned out, in my experience, it doesn't mean other people haven't been successful with other things. In my experience, a change of career or a long-term sabbatical is really the only way to kind of reset that horse's brain. So it may be both. It may be that they need to go get turned out, then they have to go to a different job, and maybe in a year you can try again. But that's not hugely sustainable for our program, especially if we own the horses, they've been donated to us or something like that. So really preventing it is the key to burnout. Yeah, other common themes that we had, talked a lot on weight limits. That always gets the crowd riled up a little bit. Talking on setting weight limits and what the policies can be for different centers, how to stay strict and abide by those policies at your center is always kind of a hot topic. So we had a lot of discussion around that.
Are you confused about equine assisted learning? Do you want to bring EAL to your center or advance your EAL journey, but you're not sure where to start or how to expand? Do you need support in choosing a certification or support for how to market your current offerings? All of your answers can be found October 24th through the 26th at the inaugural EAL Summit, brought to you by Leadership Adventures. The summit is hosted this year at Healing Strides in the beautiful Roanoke Valley, Virginia during peak foliage season. You'll learn from experienced educators, centers, researchers, and practitioners on how to begin or advance EAL at your center and add programming and revenue streams to support your center's sustainability. In 2.5 days with 24 options for sessions across 3 tracks, all eligible for PATH International CEUs, hear 4 featured speakers, panel discussions, visit qualified vendors, attend networking receptions, dinner entertainment, clinics, and more. You'll walk away with tons of new EAL ideas, resources, tools, and connections. Join Leadership Adventures at the EAL Summit from October 24th through the 26th to collaborate, innovate, and accelerate your EAL journey. Tickets and all the details are available at www.equineassistedlearning.org and in the show notes.
So another section of conversation that came up, and I had a lot of questions afterwards, was on our HETRA's leader levels and how we categorize our leaders, how we train our leaders, how we came up with so many different leader levels, all those kinds of things. And also, how is this applicable to smaller centers?
Right.
So
that's always a conversation. I feel like when we bring up all of the volunteer structure and our leader levels and all of that stuff, is some people always say, well, how does this apply to smaller centers?
And it does. In HETRA, we are a large center, but we have not always been a large center.
Right.
We're a small center. We started out with 1 participant and a couple of volunteers. And the really unique thing about HETRA is that a lot of us have been here for a good chunk of the journey. Been here for 15, 20, 30. I think Edie's been with HETRA for almost the entire 35 years we've been around. So we have a really unique perspective that we can help centers figure out how is that applicable to a small center. So I had a lot of conversations about that as well after and during my presentations.
So the part that I think is cool about that is that people don't think, why is the way you lead your horse, why does that, help with burnout? And how does having a volunteer leader structure for horse handlers and, blue, gold, platinum, and all this stuff that seems really complicated, and why does this all matter when it comes to number 1 burnout? But also it's contributing to the quality of our sessions because our horses are that much happier in their jobs. They enjoy doing their jobs and they do them well, right?
Yeah.
And that makes a huge difference for our participants. So not only are we preventing burnout for our horses, but we're also increasing the quality of our sessions and the safety and efficacy of them too. So one thing I think is cool is that we decided to do this live conference in October. We'll probably do another episode kind of talking about it maybe more here in the next few weeks, but we are going to HETRA University is going to host a live conference that covers literally everything Shelby just talked about. So everything from getting hands-on with our horses to learn the HETRA method of leading, the way we structure our volunteers, the way we structure our horses, right?
Yep.
And then we're going to do some disability education. So what can we do for physical abilities, posture, balance, that kind of a thing? And then what can we do for, more of those cognitive things, like maybe executive functioning or behaviors or sensory needs, and then putting it all together in a mock session. So that is all going to happen in Gretna in October if you're interested in getting hands-on and getting a deeper look at kind of all the stuff we just talked about, honestly.
Yeah.
So that'll be really exciting. I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah.
And seizures, understanding seizures, and I don't know if we'll do it in a 2-part or what we'll do, but all of the concepts Shelby just discussed will come out as a webinar as well at some point here in the near future. All right. Any other takeaways on Region 8, Shelby, or?
I just am always impressed with Region 8. They put on a good conference.
And it's Region 8 Listen.
Yes.
So that's important to note too. They have a secondary organization that presents with them, or hosts the conference with them, I guess.
And they always do a really great job. If you are at all interested in going to a conference outside of your region, I would highly encourage you look into Region 8. They always do a really nice job.
Yeah, for sure. I think I would second that in saying get outside your region and go see a different center. Go see the way somebody else does things, because the beautiful thing about our industry is we can all learn from each other, and we're all super willing to help everybody learn. And I think going to something like a region conference outside of your home region is a great way to do that. So,
yeah.
All right. Well, thanks, Shelby. I appreciate you. Until next time, everyone.
That's all for today. But until the next episode launches, scroll down to the show notes and click on the link to get plugged in with us on Facebook, Instagram, or our exclusive educational club at Patreon. This podcast is presented by HETRA University, the educational arm of Heartland Equine Therapeutic Riding Academy in Gretna, Nebraska. HETRA University's mission is to provide high-quality educational offerings to the EAS community. Check out all the HETRA University has to offer at www.hetrauniversity.org.